When you buy something, what are you really paying for? Is it the product itself, or is it the idea behind it? Today, we are diving into a huge legal battle that hinged on that exact question. And it all centers around what we're calling the PepsiCo precedent.
4-3. Now, that is not a sports score. That was the razor-thin margin in a high court vote that totally changed the rules for how massive global companies get taxed. And the craziest part? It all came down to what's inside a can of soda. All right, so let's set the scene. We're talking about the case of the Commissioner of Taxation versus PepsiCo Incorporated back in 2025. And what started out as a pretty standard corporate tax dispute, well, it quickly blew up into a landmark ruling with huge implications for tax law everywhere.
So who won? Well, let's just say it was a major victory for multinational corporations. But to really get why this was such a big deal, we've got to dig into what they were even fighting about in the first place.
Okay, so let's break this down. What was at the heart of this whole conflict? What were the key ingredients that led to this big legal showdown? The entire argument really hangs on understanding just a few key ideas. First up, you need to know about something called beverage concentrate. This is the essential stuff. Think of it as the secret formula, right? It's that unique blend of ingredients that a parent company like PepsiCo in the US sells to its local bottlers around the world. No concentrate, no drink. Simple as that.
But here is the multi-million-dollar question. Actually, it's more like a multi-billion-dollar question. Is that concentrate just a simple product? Or is there a hidden value packed into its price, the value of the brand itself?
And this brings us to the most important concept of all, the embedded royalty. Here's a way to think about it. Imagine a designer handbag. You're not just paying for the leather and the stitching, are you? No way. You're paying for the logo, for the brand name, for the idea of that bag. That extra value, that is the embedded royalty. And the tax office argued that the very same thing was happening with Pepsi's concentrate.
So why all the fuss about an embedded royalty? Well, it's because of something called royalty withholding tax. This is a very specific tax on payments made for intellectual property, like using a famous brand name. So the government's argument was pretty straightforward. If the price of the concentrate includes this embedded royalty for the brand, then that part of the price should be taxed.
Okay, so the battle lines were drawn. The arguments were on the table. Now let's get to the main event and see how the High Court actually ruled on this really complicated issue. You really had two completely different stories here. On one side, the Commissioner of Taxation was saying, look, part of that price is clearly a payment for using the famous PepsiCo brands, and we should be able to tax it. But PepsiCo's argument was much simpler. Nope, this is just a sale of goods. There's no separate royalty here to tax. And just look at this. This shows you how incredibly close this decision was. 4 judges agreed with PepsiCo, 3 judges sided with the commissioner. I mean, just one judge changing their mind would have completely flipped the script for countless companies. It was that close.
In the end, the majority came down with a really clear verdict. The court found that, and I'm quoting here, the payments for beverage concentrate did not include embedded royalties. They decided they were just payments for goods. For PepsiCo and a whole lot of other global companies, this was the exact outcome they had been fighting for.
But look, this decision wasn't just about Pepsi. Not by a long shot. Its real impact is what's known as the PepsiCo precedent, and that's why this case is still so important today. So what's a precedent? Well, think of it like a benchmark. It's a ruling that sets the rules of the game for any similar cases that come up in the future. By saying there's no embedded royalty here, the High Court set a very clear standard, and that standard is going to influence tax disputes for years and years.
All right, so let's boil this all down to the key takeaways. First, this was a huge win for multinational companies, no doubt about it. It protects the common way they do business from a new tax. Second, it gave everyone some much-needed legal clarity. It basically drew a line in the sand about these kinds of payments. And finally, it created a powerful legal precedent that's now the starting point for corporate tax fights all over the world.
So this whole massive, multi-billion-dollar legal fight, it really all comes down to one simple question, doesn't it? The next time you buy a product with a famous name on it, just ask yourself, how much am I paying for the thing in my hand, and how much am I paying for the idea in my head? Because as this case proves, the difference between those two can be worth an absolute fortune.